Normal graves, normal graves, normal graves, giant monument. Man, that guy must have really hated his family, huh? What, don't believe me? Think that's a pretty wild assumption to make? Well, check out this comment that Bigelow Brook Farms left on my channel a couple weeks ago. Sometime you should look up the giant Bosworth gravestone in Eastford, Connecticut at Westford and Church Road. We had always heard that he hated his family so much that he put all his money into the headstone instead of letting them inherit his money. Always wanted to know if it was true. Well, Bigelow Brook Farms, I would be happy to try and answer that for you. Our first Dime Store Adventures viewer-requested story. According to local legend here in Eastford, that rock back there wasn't just born out of run-of-the-mill vanity. That is hatred in stone. That is anger in rock. Animosity, resentment, ill will, rancor, and venom, all wrapped up into one big hunk of granite. Does the folklore match the facts? Well, let's find out. Alright guys, I'm just going to be upfront with you on this one. The formatting for this video is going to be very different from what I normally do. See, most of the time I show up at a place and I already have it kind of set in stone what I'm going to talk about, right? Like I've got a rough outline of what I want to say and the order I want to talk about things, and you know, I've got the story pretty much well set in my head, right? But this time when I was coming out here, I really wasn't happy with the information that I had, right? So on the way, I stopped at a whole bunch of local libraries here in northeastern Connecticut and a bunch of historical societies. And to be honest, my understanding of the Bosworth stone story kind of got completely flipped on its head. So this video is basically just going to be me kind of casually ad-libbing and talking you through the information that I found out about the stone and presenting it to you and just kind of letting you decide for yourself what you want to believe. Because I found so many twists and turns in this story today and visited so many interesting places and met so many interesting people that I just want to lay it all out for you, all right? So you're gonna have to forgive me for looking at my phone a bunch here on this one. I'm basically just gonna kind of read off my notes and a bunch of pictures that I took of old books and archived things that I found in historical societies today. So let's just get to it, all right? So basically, the way that I started out researching this was how I start out everything. Looking at old newspaper sites, you know, Google Books, regular Google, find a grave, all that kind of stuff, you know? Just trying to figure out what this guy's life was about and if there's any initial validity to the story. And I found a few decently helpful things. Like right off the bat, it was easy to find out that the guy's name is Lorne Bosworth. He died at the age of 79 in 1903. He ran a general store here in Eastford back in 1877. He voted against abolishing the death penalty in 1845. Oh, and here's his death record, 1903. I'm pretty sure the cause of death entry there says cerebral hemorrhage, but I'm not completely certain. It's like doctor handwriting, I guess. Probably the most useful thing I found, though, is actually from an old lumber industry magazine. I found an issue from 1906. In there, it kind of had a section on New England news in the lumber industry. And one of the little paragraphs basically says, Lorne Bosworth just died. We're auctioning off a few hundred acres of his timberland. That's pretty useful, right? It tells us that Bosworth probably made his money for that monument from the lumber industry. But then I found something in a treasurer's report from 1908 for the state of Connecticut. There was a little section in there on how much the state collected in inheritance tax in 1907. And wouldn't you know it, one of the entries, Lorne Bosworth, $5.71 paid in inheritance tax to the state of Connecticut. So then I was thinking, all right, maybe I can just figure out at least if the basics of this story are true by using numbers, right? If I can dig my way into early 20th century Connecticut state tax code, I can kind of reverse the math, figure out how much his estate was worth. And once you know it, that treasurer's report actually included how the inheritance tax was calculated at the time. 1/2 of 1%, so 1/200th of the total value of the estate. And if you don't know, estate in this context basically just means what was the total value of everything that Lorne left behind when he died, right? So, all right, we take 200, we multiply it by 571, and we get about 1,150 bucks. which you translate that with inflation into 2022 dollars, and we have about $35,000. That's the value of his estate, right? And then I wanted to try and estimate the value of the monument that he got, right? And I found a similar looking monument over in Salt Lake City that was bought in around the same time that Lauren Bosworth stone would have been built. And I found out that it was built for $1,800. It was the grave marker of Orson Pratt, a very well-known guy in the Mormon church. And 1,800 bucks today would be worth about $58,000. But you know, it's kind of hard to tell just from Google Maps how big that stone is in comparison to the Bosworth stone, right? But luckily for me, I actually had my brother and sister, just by pure coincidence, visiting Salt Lake City at the time. So I had them jet over there, take a couple pictures, and send them back to me. And wouldn't you know it, the Bosworth stone is way bigger, like way, way, way bigger. So then I'm thinking, all right, the Bosworth stone must have been like minimum 50 grand, right? So if his estate was worth $35,000 and he spent 50 grand on the monument, then probably some veracity to the story, right? There's got to be at least some kernel of truth in there. Like maybe he bought the stone before he died for 50 grand, and then the money he left for his family, only 35 grand. So he spent over half of his money on that giant stone. I mean, why he did that, I would never know just from that mathematical information alone, but it tells you that something is going on here, right? There has to be something in the story just from those numbers alone. And initially I was just going to leave it at that, right? There we go. Boom. There's maybe a kernel of truth to this. I don't know how much from there though. But I wasn't really happy with that, like I said. So on the way over here, I made my way through a whole bunch of libraries and found out a whole bunch of stuff that totally changed everything. All right, so now I'm just gonna thumb through these pictures I took and tell you about the crazy little day I had, all right? So the first place I went was the Killingly Public Library, which is a little ways from Eastford, but I thought it's a big library. They might have some stuff on Windham County, which is where we were, and I might find some kind of information in there. And boy, did I. Right off the bat, I walk in, I say, hey, you got a local history section? And they say, yeah, right over here. And they show me a whole ton of books. So I get to looking, find some good stuff right away. Like this, the Windham County Transcript Death Notices from 1900 to 1909. In there, I found Lauren Bosworth mentioned, which is a good sign. It tells us that, you know, at least the guy might be mentioned in stuff that you can find in this library, right? And then I found this collection of loose leaf paper in a clear plastic binder on historic places, points of interest in Connecticut. And there you go, Lauren Bosworth Monument. The coup de grace that I found in the Killingly Library was this little book, The Colonial Burying Grounds of Eastern Connecticut, which, wouldn't you know it, had a section on the Bosworth Monument. But more importantly, it cited another book, a 1976 edition of a very obscure little book on the history of Eastford, Connecticut by Cameron. And when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, please let there be a copy of this online somewhere. This is gonna be exactly what we need because the Colonial cemetery book that I found made a point to say that this Eastford book said a whole bunch of stuff about the Bosworth Monument. So I gotta find it, right? So I just kind of sat in the corner of the library for a while on my tiny little phone screen, scrolling, looking through pages, trying to find, and nothing. So I'm thinking, all right, if I can't get my hands on this in person, the information in that book is gonna be lost to me. I'm gonna have an incomplete story here. But I decided to just press on. Maybe I could find it while I'm looking in other libraries. Maybe not. All right, so we got some good stuff from the Killingly Library, right? Now it's time to check out the Putnam Library. So I head a couple miles north up to Putnam. I walk into the library, go up to the librarian and say, hey, you got a local history section I can check out? And they say, actually, the Putnam Historical Society is open right now and it's in the building right above us and they got all that kind of stuff. Go talk to them. And I was like, on it. I walk in there, open up the door, and I gotta tell you, I've been in some like historical society places before. This place, it had an atmosphere, right? I walk in, shelves and shelves of old books. There's one dude, an old guy, standing over a table. He's got big, thick gloves on. He's looking at this gigantic, like 3-foot long book of old newspapers in Putnam. He's leafing the pages over. There's a woman on a computer a little over there. They're probably working on something. And the guy's going, I don't see any mention in 1920. Looks like nothing in 1921 either. Oh wait, I got it right here. Look, it was built originally as a fire tower in 1921. And then he sees me and he's like, oh, hey, what can we help you with? So I'm just standing there, right? I'm nervous now. I'm thinking, oh, I'm out of my league. These guys are pros. I'm just a novice. But I suck it up. I say, hey, you got any books on the history of Eastford, Connecticut? Any kind of reference like that up here? The guy goes, I don't think so. It's really mostly Putnam up here. And then the woman at the computer goes, wait, actually, we do have one book on Eastford, Connecticut. And she walks down one of the aisles deep in. I'm watching her hand go up to the aisle. She grabs a book, she pulls it out, and it's Cameron's 1976 Eastford history book, the one that I just read about and the one that I was looking for. And I say, hot dog. I grab that, I sit down, and I get reading, and I find everything. All right, so we got our holy grail, right? Now it's time to look through it, see what we can find from this obscure little 50-year-old history book, right? So right off the bat, it tells us that all this information is being pulled out of a letter from 1907. So this is gonna get us basically as close to the truth as we're gonna get. This is a primary source, right? And what does it tell us right off the bat? Lauren Bosworth's monument cost $6,000. That is ridiculous. That's like 180 grand in today's money. Remember, my initial estimate was gonna be like 50 grand, 100 grand. No, it is way more than that. Just an insane amount of money. And we continue to read and we find out why. It's because he set aside 1/6 of his property in his will to be used on a grave monument. But because he probably didn't actually know how much money he had with all of his assets combined, he had no idea it was gonna be 180 grand total. So in order to fulfill his will, they had to go out of their way to get the most massive, ginormous, huge thing possible, right? Just crazy gigantic. So gigantic that as they brought it from Hartford to Eastford to set up here, because it was carved in Hartford, I guess, they had to fortify all the bridges that they were carrying the stone across. The thing was so giant, so massive, so excessive that, look at this, it says the finest aggregation of teams ever seen in Eastford before or since had to be pulled together just to move this giant stone that this guy basically accidentally decreed that he wanted built for him, right? Look at this, it took 2 weeks to get it from Hartford all the way over here. And they went at the speed of 1 mile every 3 hours. Just crazy. But here's probably the most important part, and the part that's most pertinent to our story, right? Because remember, the original story was that Lauren did this because he hated his family, right? And remember, this is from a guy who knew Lauren, lived in Eastford with Lauren. Some townspeople are disgusted that a man who is disliked by quite a few should have such a fine monument. So people hated this guy, and now they're being forced to spend 2 weeks of their time dragging a several-ton hunk of granite across Connecticut so that it can be the biggest, most gigantic behemoth in the middle of their little town cemetery for the rest of their lives.
Hey guys, it's me. Just wanted to throw in some quick voiceover here. I'm back at my house editing, but I was just thinking you might be wondering why the original estimation I came up with for the value of Lauren Bosworth's estate was so low. And it's because the Treasury report that I was pulling the tax code from actually was incomplete. Once I got back to my house, I looked into it and I found this handy little book from 1908, which just kind of goes over general inheritance tax, both federally and across all the states. And as you can see right here, it's not just 1/2 of 1%. It's 1/2 of 1% of every dollar beyond $10,000. So the first $10,000, there is 0 inheritance tax. So that's why I had such a low guess.
Hey, so I think it's about time we wrap this up, right? What did we come out here originally to answer? Did Lauren Bosworth really spend all his money on that giant monument so that his family couldn't have any? I think we've probably figured out today that that can't exactly be true, right? I mean, remember in the Cameron book, we saw that Lauren stipulated that 1/6 of the total value of his estate be spent on the monument. We don't know what happened to the other 5/6. Maybe it went to his family, maybe not, but if he built that monument explicitly and only so that his family wouldn't have any access to his money, would have spent a lot more than 1/6 on it, right? Which would have been an insane amount, but still. But I think, personally at least, the story that we did uncover is actually a little more interesting than the legend. I mean, think about it. We saw that the people of Eastford, Connecticut hated Lauren Bosworth. Can you imagine being some guy that lived here in 1903? You hate Lauren Bosworth's guts. You find out that he finally died. You're so excited. Oh my God, he's finally gone. I hated that guy. We all hated that guy. And then you find out that he misunderstood how much money he had and accidentally ordered himself a several ton-pound hunk of granite worth 180 grand that now you and a bunch of other people from Eastford have got to lug across the state of Connecticut. You got to reinforce all the bridges around town. You got to drag this big rock down the dirt roads. Horse teams behind you. You're so tired your back hurts, but every time you look behind you, you see his name up on that monument. Bosworth, Bosworth, Bosworth. Finally, you get here, you plunk it down in the middle of the cemetery. You look around, you see all your family members here in Eastford, your ancestors. Now they're in the shadow of this giant, excessive monument of a man that you hated. And you know that if you're ever buried in this cemetery, you're gonna be stuck underneath his umbrella too. I don't know, that's a pretty good story to me, I think. But I'll see you guys next time.